In this video, I want to talk a little bit more about the concepts of period and amplitude. So recall what we're talking about here are functions which repeat themselves. So they repeat themselves over and over. Like the sine curve does or the cosine curve, but there are many oscillating functions. We could have what's called sometimes the sawtooth function or a square wave. That one's not a function, it fails the vertical line test, but it still repeats on a regular basis. So the period is the time, if you're using t along the x-axis, or the amount of x. So for one complete cycle. So for instance, y equals sine x. You know this, pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, 2 pi, height 1, height minus 1. The period, the time for one complete oscillation is 2 pi. The frequency is just 1 over the period. So the frequency would be one over 2 pi. So as the period goes up, the frequency goes down, and vice versa. The amplitude, this is the distance from the middle to the top or the middle to the bottom. It also equals, of course, 1/2 the distance from the bottom to the top. And the amplitude in the case of sine or cosine is 1. The period has to do with the frequency if this was a note, and the amplitude has to do with its loudness if this was a sound wave. Okay. I'd like to take a look at the following functions. A times sine bx plus c, or a times cosine bx plus c. We have some number in front of the a, which could possibly be 1, some number in front of the x, which could possibly be 1, and some number that we're adding to it, which could possibly be 0. We've already taken a look at functions which look like this. We know that the a has to do with the vertical stretch or compression. So and if it's negative, we turn the whole curve upside down. We know that B has to do with horizontal stretches and compressions. And we know that C has to do with vertical shifts. But I said this was all about period and amplitude. Amplitude is equal to the absolute value of A. Whatever the absolute value of A is, if it's 3, that means the distance from the middle to the top and the middle to the bottom will be 3. If it's -5, the distance from the middle to the top or the middle to the bottom will be 5. You take the absolute value of A and that gives you the amplitude. The period for these two curves is going to be 2 pi divided by the absolute value of B. The bigger B is, the smaller the period is, or the larger the frequency. Remember, the frequency is 1 over the period. And of course, C just gives you vertical shift. But these are the two things, the two relationships between amplitude and period, and these coefficients that I want you to get out of this video.